So, the Las Vegas Raiders are heading into a pivotal offseason with some significant decisions to make. While there's still one game left against the Chargers this Sunday, it's clear that once that game wraps up, the focus will quickly shift to the future of this team. One of the biggest factors in shaping that future will be deciding which quarterback they plan to move forward with. Antonio Pierce's role as head coach is certainly part of the conversation, but the quarterback situation is a separate and arguably more pressing discussion. What's up, buddies? Welcome back. If you are new here, make sure you hit the subscribe button. We cover all AFC West news here on this channel. So this became a widely discussed now. Yesterday, Dane Brugler, a draft analyst for The Athletic, published an article that caught a lot of attention. Within that article, he shared a comment from an AFC scout who said, "Man, I feel bad for the teams trying to find even one quarterback in this group." That's a strong statement, and it highlights just how uncertain this year's quarterback draft class really is. Right now, Cam Ward is considered by some to be the top quarterback prospect, but even that isn't a sure thing. If he does end up being QB1, he could be the first overall pick. But there are plenty of doubts about whether Ward can succeed at the NFL level. And beyond Ward, there's even less confidence. Players like Jalen Milroe and Shedder Sanders are seen as risky prospects, with some analysts believing they shouldn't be taken in the first round at all. One lesser discussed name is Brady Cook. While Cook doesn't carry the same high profile as some of the other quarterbacks, he's an intriguing prospect. Playing in the SEC, he's led Missouri to consistent success, winning 10 or 11 games each season he's been there. Cook has an impressive record with over 40 touchdowns in the last 2 years and very few turnovers. That kind of efficiency and success in a tough conference makes him an interesting target in the second or third round, or possibly even later. The sentiment around this draft class is that it's just not strong when it comes to quarterbacks. And while this isn't the first time we've seen a weaker class, it does put teams like the Raiders in a tough spot. Last year, 6 quarterbacks were selected in the first round, but this year it looks like the pool of top-tier talent has really dried up. Looking back, it's easy to say the Raiders should have traded up last year to get a quarterback. But that's not as simple as it sounds. Teams holding top picks often ask for a lot in return, like 3 first-round picks. For a team like the Raiders with several positions to fill, giving up so much for one player isn't an easy choice. The decision they made last year might have been the best option at the time. However, with the draft coming up and limited quarterback talent available, the Raiders are now at a crucial crossroads. The Raiders' approach of selecting the best player available last year clearly paid off. Not only did they land Brock Bowers, but they also secured Jackson Powers-Johnson in the second round, a strategy that added real value to the roster. Looking ahead to this offseason, the Raiders are again faced with some intriguing decisions. The question becomes, what can they realistically do to build for next season? Dane Brugler's recent insight sheds light on the quarterback dilemma. When an AFC scout says they feel bad for teams trying to find a quarterback in this draft class, it's a clear warning about the lack of top-tier talent. The reality is, while one quarterback might go in the first round, the rest don't appear to have first-round grades. Desperate teams may still reach for a quarterback, but that doesn't guarantee success. For the Raiders, it's essential to evaluate all options and not fall into the trap of reaching for a quarterback just because it's a need. This brings us back to the strategy that worked last year, focusing on the best player available. If the Raiders end up with the 8th overall pick, there could be some excellent talent on the board. Players like Abdul Carter, Josh Connerly Jr. from Oregon, or Will Johnson from Michigan are all names to watch. The Raiders should seriously consider taking the best available talent at that pick, even if it's not a quarterback. Then, in the second round, they could revisit the quarterback position and see if there's a viable option available. This type of calculated approach allows the Raiders to address immediate needs while keeping an eye on long-term success. For instance, a few years ago, the Denver Broncos chose Patrick Surtain II over a quarterback, opting for the best player available. That's why that decision has paid off tremendously, as Surtain has become a cornerstone of their defense. Similarly, the Raiders could take the same approach in this draft by selecting someone like Will Johnson, a player with the potential to become one of the league's top cornerbacks. This year's running back class is exceptionally deep, which gives the Raiders plenty of options. For example, R.J. Harvey is an exciting prospect. Harvey has the talent of a borderline first-round pick and will likely be taken within the top 45 to 60 selection. Ashton Jeanty is the name most people are hyping up, with some saying he's a top 5 worthy pick. While Jeanty is undoubtedly talented, there are some reservations about him. One concern is his workload. Jeanty had 345 carries this season, which is an enormous amount. That kind of usage raises questions about longevity and wear and tear. Additionally, while his production is excellent, ranking 4th in yards per attempt, other running backs like Tre'Veyon Henderson and R.J. Harvey are right there with him, average 6.9 yards per carry and 6.8 yards per carry respectively, and both against tougher competition than Jeanty faced. It's not to diminish Jenny's accomplishments, but when you factor in the level of competition, it's clear there are other strong options in this draft. Another red flag for Jeanty is his listed size. At 5 feet 7 inches, his height could be a limiting factor for teams considering him as a top 15 pick. Historically, running backs of that stature haven't had the kind of success you'd expect from someone drafted so high. That's why I believe the sweet spot for selecting a running back in this class is in the second or third round. At that range, you're still getting elite talent without overinvesting in a position that, let's be honest, doesn't have the same long-term value as others. Now let's put mock drafts aside for a moment and talk about another route, veteran quarterbacks. The Raiders have the option to pursue established quarterbacks in the offseason, and there are some intriguing names that could be available. Players like Dak Prescott or Kirk Cousins come to mind. Kirk Cousins, for example, is likely to be replaced, which could make him a free agent. And if Cowboys decide to stick with Dak Prescott, then the Raiders might have to explore younger, less proven options like Sam Darnold. While some Raiders fans are calling for a move to bring in Darnold, I'm skeptical he'll be available. The Vikings may have found their guy in Darnold, and quarterback talent is notoriously difficult to secure. If the Vikings were to move on from one of their quarterbacks, it seems far more likely they'd part ways with J.J. McCarthy than Sam Darnold. At just 26 years old, Darnold has shown this season that he can be a legitimate quarterback. J.J. McCarthy, despite being a top 10 pick, hasn't proven himself to the same degree. The potential is there, but it's not yet guaranteed that McCarthy can reach the level Darnold has displayed. Now, the Raiders could explore a trade for J.J. McCarthy. It's a possibility that shouldn't be dismissed outright. However, is McCarthy worth the 8th overall pick if that's where the Raiders end up selecting? That's debatable. In most cases, a high draft pick like that holds more value than a player who has yet to fully establish himself. That said, if the Raiders wanted to make a move for McCarthy, it wouldn't be a terrible decision. Trading for him at the right price could provide a middle ground solution if they're uncertain about the draft class or free agency options. Speaking of other potential targets, there are a few veterans and younger quarterbacks who might become available. Someone like Matthew Stafford, for example, could be in play. Even though the Rams are experiencing some success, there's speculation that Sean McVay may want to move on from Stafford. He represents the older, experienced category of quarterbacks the Raiders could consider. On the younger side, there are players like Justin Fields, Trey Lance, and Zach Wilson. While none of these quarterbacks have reached their potential with their current teams, there's precedent for players finding success later in their careers. Look at examples like Baker Mayfield, Geno Smith, or even Sam Darnold. Each found a resurgence after moving to new situations in years 4, 5, or 6 of their careers. It's entirely possible that one of these quarterbacks could take a similar path with the right opportunity. The Raiders should absolutely consider all their quarterback options heading into next season. One path could be sticking with Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell. If they choose this route, it's likely Aiden O'Connell would start the season. However, I'd also be curious to see how Gardner Minshew performs with Scott Turner as his offensive coordinator instead of Luke Getsy. There's a lot of debate about Minshew's potential, with some labeling him as a terrible quarterback. But honestly, the Raiders' biggest issue this season wasn't their quarterback. It was their offensive coordinator. Scott Turner has shown that he's a much more competent play caller compared to Luke Getsy. Even with the injuries and challenges the team faced, Turner's approach is noticeably better. The key to drafting a fresh quarterback like Milroe or Dart is understanding that they wouldn't start immediately. The Raiders could begin the season with O'Connell or Minshew, allowing the rookie to develop in the background. If things don't go well, let's say the team starts 2-5, then they could bring the rookie in to see what he can offer. The Raiders have multiple paths to consider, and while each comes with its risks, they need to focus on both short-term stability and long-term potential as they navigate this critical offseason. We're still months away from the draft, and as evaluations continue, rankings will inevitably shift. Over the next 4 to 5 months, we'll get a clearer picture of where these players stand and who truly deserves to be considered in the top rounds. For now, it's about staying flexible, evaluating all options, and making decisions that set the Raiders up for both short and long-term success. As the draft gets closer, we'll likely learn a lot more about how teams value these prospects, but the Raiders need to start thinking strategically about what they truly need. Outside of quarterback, 2 key areas stand out: wide receiver and running back. Both positions should be high on their list, and it wouldn't be surprising to see the Raiders draft multiple running backs in this class. Now, here's what I want to know from you. Should the Raiders gamble on a quarterback in the first round, or stick to the best player available strategy? Which position do you think is the Raiders' most pressing need heading into the 2025 draft? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more in-depth Raiders analysis and updates. See you next time!